Okay, Dr. Shin has kindly permitted me to talk to you about the Iliad. I suppose the Iliad is the greatest single work in Western literature. The only other work which might be compared with it or to it in stature, in value, is Dante's Divine Comedy. I don't think Shakespeare's plays can stand comparison with the Iliad individually. Together, Shakespeare's plays, or the group of great tragedies from 1600 to 1608, certainly stand with the Iliad, but no single work does, in my opinion. It is absolutely great, and Homer is a great genius and a great poet. Okay. So I'm going to tell you about the Iliad, and I hope that you have read it, but I understand if you haven't, because the Iliad is hard. It's very demanding. If you haven't read it, I hope that what I tell you will inspire you to read it. It's impossible to read the Iliad once and to understand it to any depth. And this, of course, is true of anything really great. To read Hamlet once is to read it, even with lectures, somewhat superficially. So, I don't know. So it goes. Now, the Iliad was composed by Homer, according to tradition, around 750 BC. Homer was living in Ionia, an area on the coast of Asia Minor, Turkey, on the western coast of Asia Minor. Ionia was an area, not united. It consisted of many city-states which were Greek. So the culture of Ionia was Greek. In 750, the level of culture of Ionia was higher, much higher, than the level of culture in mainland Greece, including, of course, Athens and any other place. A very high level of culture, so that after Homer, philosophy began in Ionia in the 7th century BC, and 7th and 6th. So we're not talking about some primitive culture here. We're talking about a very highly evolved culture. I guess the highest in the world in 750 BC, certainly the highest in the world at that time, and just an amazing place. Homer, by tradition, a blind man. He did not write. No one wrote much at that time, 750 BC. The main argument is that the Greek alphabet did exist by 750 BC, but it wasn't used to write poems or even laws. So Homer composed his poem and performed it orally, and it was passed down for 200 years until 550 BC, when it was first written down, probably in Athens. Oral tradition is an amazing thing. People are faithful to it when it's great, but talented or clever people who recited something like Homer's poems, probably also made little changes, little improvements. It was sacred, but still could be tampered with, and I think that's okay. Now, a very important point to understand is that Homer, in a sense, comes at the end of a long tradition, not at the beginning. It's true that he stands at the beginning of Western literature. This is true. But the poems that he composed, the Iliad and the Odyssey, are the result of long traditions, probably going back 300 years. That is, the Trojan War between the Greeks and the Trojans is a historical event which probably took place about 1100 BC. Okay, This was an amazing event which caused the whole Greek world to marvel. And so in the Greek world, in Ionia especially, poets started to tell stories about the Trojan heroes, the Greek heroes, and the Trojan War. These great heroes emerged then, and probably, I imagine, around 1000, that is 1000 BC, these stories started to take shape, and a meter, a poetic form also evolved gradually, in which these stories might be told. Okay. Now, many stories were told before Homer, but Homer then, in a sense, put into final definitive is the word form, great beautiful form, these stories that had been told for at least 200 and maybe 300 years. In that sense then, Homer inherited these great traditions. What Homer invented is hard to say. A great poet, no question, and his personal stamp is on the poems, but he also inherited these stories. He did not invent the stories. This is an important point for students of Shakespeare to know too. Shakespeare never invented any story. He used stories that had been invented, made, written by other authors. He did not invent. The study of ancient literatures and even of Shakespeare forces students to realize that this concept of originality is probably exaggerated and misunderstood. Anyway, now to the story. I have to tell you a lot about background, because without the background you can't understand it. One can't understand it. I would begin with, now some of this is a little bit naughty, but bear with me, although you are middle school and perhaps high school students, and perhaps you are not used to some of this, you have to get used to it. It's literature and it's life, and you're not infants. Okay, here we go. Zeus, the king of the gods, the Greek gods, often in the myths ran after various women, other goddesses, and even mortal women. One time, though, he was told that by Prometheus, long story there, Prometheus, whose name means foreknowledge, F-O-R-E, foreknowledge, Prometheus, that if he had a child, if he produced a child by one goddess, that child would be greater than Zeus. Well, Zeus was worried about this. He didn't want to be dethroned, but Prometheus refused to tell him who this goddess might be. Zeus did some terrible things to Prometheus. Prometheus resisted still, and finally they reached a kind of settlement, a kind of compromise, and Prometheus told him that this goddess was Thetis, Thetis, a minor sea goddess. Surprise. So Zeus decided, of course, he was going to avoid Thetis, and he didn't want any problems at all from Thetis, so he forced Thetis to marry a mortal man, Peleus. Peleus was a great warrior, but he was no god, so if Thetis married Peleus, then their child would be mortal, no problem. At the wedding of Thetis and Peleus, all the gods and all the mortal heroes, for that matter, were invited. One goddess was not invited, Eris, E-R-I-S. Her name means discord, fighting, strife. Of course they didn't want her. She, Eris, made a golden apple, and on the golden apple she wrote, "To the fairest," meaning to the most beautiful, and threw the apple into the wedding hall. three goddesses claimed the apple. Hera, Zeus's wife, Athena, goddess of war and other things, and Aphrodite, the goddess of feminine beauty, desire. Not really love, feminine beauty and desire. Okay, all three said, the apple is for me. Uh-oh, problems. Zeus, decision. Zeus said, not me. I'm not going to make this decision. So they decided that the most beautiful man in the world would make the decision, would decide who was the fairest goddess. The most beautiful man in the world was Paris, a son of the king and queen of Troy. The king of Troy was Priam, the queen Hecuba. Now, I have to tell his story. When Paris was born, a prophet, P-R-O-P-H-E-T, in Troy, had a dream. And in the dream, this little baby, Paris, appeared, and in the background of the dream, the city of Troy was burning, was destroyed. This meant that somehow Paris was connected to the destruction of Troy. Oh, this is terrible. We must get rid of this child. Shall we kill the child? No. In Greek myth, no, because then the Furies, goddesses of the underworld, would pursue and torment us forever. We mustn't kill kindred blood. Then let's send the child to Mount Ida, 100 miles away, to be raised there as a shepherd. No one will ever know that he's a prince of Troy, and everyone will be happy. So, little Paris was sent to Mount Ida, was raised as a shepherd there, didn't know that he was a prince of Troy, a very rich and powerful city, and he grew up there. But now here we go. The goddesses are going to ask little Paris to judge which of them is the most beautiful. Okay, famous scene. Hermes leads the three goddesses there. Now they're goddesses, so Paris can't see them as flesh. Therefore, the forces which they represent are presented to Paris. Basically, these are bribes. Hera offers little Paris, who now is perhaps 20 years old, Hera offers him political power. If Paris chooses him, then Hera will give him great power and great political power. He will be an emperor. Athena promises to make him the greatest warrior, fighter in the world. She, goddess of war. Aphrodite promises him the most beautiful woman in the world. Well, this is interesting. His decision, Paris's decision, will show a lot about him. He chooses Aphrodite. This, of course, tells us that he is a man who prefers pleasure to military glory or political power. Aphrodite wins. Hera hates Paris. Athena hates Paris too, and they will hate Troy. They will hate Troy for a good reason. Aphrodite has won, and Aphrodite now tells Paris, I will give you Helen of Sparta. She's not yet Helen of Troy. Helen is married to the king of Sparta, Menelaus. So the first thing Aphrodite does is she takes Paris to Troy to introduce him to his father and mother. Ooh, difficult moment. Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad. I'm home after 20 years. You remember you sent me away to Mount Ida. Of course, they feel guilty. Mom and Dad feel very embarrassed and guilty. And so when Paris says, Mom, Dad, give me a ship with lots of gold and lots of nice things on it, they certainly can't say no. They feel too guilty. And thus, Troy becomes implicated. Priam and Hecuba, king and queen of Troy, become accomplices, we say, in this crime that's going to be committed. Troy is guilty. But the reasons are so complex and wonderful. The story is a wonderful story. Now I have to tell you about the background of Helen. Zeus was attracted to Leda, Leda, who was the queen of Sparta. Leda was married to a man named Tyndareos, doesn't matter much, though he's a good man later in myths. They are married, and she is already pregnant by her husband. But Zeus, famous story, I must tell it to you, it's in paintings. If you go to a museum in the West, you'll see it. Leda one day was playing with her maids out in the woods. They were bathing in a stream. Along came a swan, a beautiful swan. The girls have no clothes on, innocent. And here, swan, come here, swan, play with me, swan. Quack, 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 goes Mr. Swan. And suddenly the swan rapes her. Yes, rape. If you don't know the word, you should. The swan raped her because the swan was Zeus. Zeus in disguise as a swan. What a dirty trick. Anyway, we'll judge Zeus some other time. And these myths are a little bit absurd. But anyway, there we are. So now Leda is pregnant twice. By her husband and by Zeus. Well, I will skip a lot. One of the children that she produces by Zeus is Helen. Helen then is a daughter of Zeus. Now the way these myths evolve is probably pretty obvious. That is, a woman is so beautiful, a man is so handsome, or a man is so powerful, or such a great athlete, a Michael Jordan or something, that people say, wow, must be a child of Zeus. Pretty obvious. Helen was very beautiful. Must be Zeus's child. Anyway, Helen grew up in Sparta, and then when it came time for her to choose a husband, all the famous princes, all the famous men of the Greek world came to Sparta because they wanted to marry Helen, of course. Her father, her mortal father, Tyndareos, had a very good idea. And the idea was, okay, Helen will choose one of you princes, but the other princes must promise that if anyone ever takes Helen away from her husband, that you other princes will come to the rescue and restore her to her husband. They all promise, and then she chooses Menelaus, who is a prince of Argos. Great story. Then Menelaus moves to Sparta, and Menelaus becomes the king of Sparta. His queen is Helen, and there they live. They produce one daughter, Hermione, later. Okay, so now the stage is set. Paris is in Troy with his rich ship full of rich goodies. Led by Aphrodite, he will come to Sparta to find Helen. Aphrodite will lure, L-U-R-E, lure Menelaus away from Sparta for a few days. And during that time, Paris will take Helen, not by force probably, away, will kidnap her, if you like, abduct is the word, and take her to Troy to live. Well, but she's the wife of Menelaus. Menelaus will return to Sparta, find no wife, wife gone, be very angry. Now he will go to his older brother Agamemnon. And this is key too. The whole story is so complex and so wonderful. Agamemnon is the most powerful king in the Greek world. But he is missing something in his life. He wants military glory. Menelaus, his younger brother, comes to him and says, "Brother, someone has kidnapped my daughter. We must get her back." Agamemnon says, "Oh, wonderful opportunity for me to achieve my dream, military glory. I will gather all those princes who promised to come to the rescue before. I will make them keep their promise. I will bring together a great army, and we will attack Troy, take Troy, and I will achieve my dream of military glory. Here we go. The Trojan War is almost ready to start. Now, a key moment comes, and I must tell you this too, because I'll tell you other Greek stories later on with Dr. Shin's permission, but so many of the stories have to do with the Trojan War that all of this is background, not only to the Iliad, but to the Odyssey and to tragedies too, in Greek drama. Okay, so the army gathers, a vast army, 50,000 men to 60,000, 1,000 ships by tradition, and probably true, gathers on the east coast of Greece in one place. They gather, but the wind doesn't blow. No wind, no sailing. Days pass, weeks pass, maybe a couple of months pass even, and no wind. Agamemnon is worried, the men are bored, the ships are rotting, trouble. Poor Agamemnon's dream is vanishing. So he consults a prophet, Calchas, Calchas usually. What's wrong, Calchas? Is one of the gods angry? Yes, Artemis is angry. Artemis is the goddess of small animals and the hunt. And it seems that 15 years ago, Agamemnon, when your fourth child was born, Iphigenia, beautiful little girl, you promised Artemis that you would sacrifice the most beautiful creature born that year to Artemis if Artemis did something for you. Doesn't matter what. Artemis did something for you, and you sacrificed a beautiful deer. Wrong. The most beautiful creature born that year was Iphigenia, your daughter. You should have sacrificed her. Artemis is angry, and Artemis now insists that you sacrifice Iphigenia, or no wind, no Troy, no Trojan War, no dream. Here it is. A great myth, really, I think, about a father who must choose between career, let's face it, and child. A very common dilemma for men, and very often we men make wrong decisions. No question in Agamemnon's mind, he will sacrifice his daughter. No. How is he going to get his daughter? He's going to trick his wife, Clytemnestra. He's going to send a message to Argos and his wife, Clytemnestra. Clytemnestra, come quick. Bring Iphigenia, our daughter. Achilles, the greatest of all the warriors, wants to marry our daughter Iphigenia. Oh, wonderful. Clytemnestra brings Iphigenia. Agamemnon tricks her, sacrifices his daughter. The winds blow. The ships set sail to Troy. Clytemnestra returns to Argos full of hatred and rage toward her husband, Agamemnon. If he ever comes home, she will kill him. That's another story, but that story is told 4 times in the Odyssey, but we're in the Iliad. Off go the boats to Troy. The Trojan War begins. All of this is background, remember, to the Iliad. The Trojan War goes on and on and on. In the 10th year, now we're ready for the Iliad to begin, because the Iliad deals with an incident, you might almost say, that lasts probably about 45 days, which takes place during the 10th year of the Trojan War. Now we're ready to begin. The Iliad is not about the Trojan War. The Iliad is about the anger of Achilles. And that's it. The anger of Achilles, and that's why it's so great. Because the Iliad really is an analysis, I think, of anger. Not only Achilles' anger, but maybe anybody's anger. And as such, it's an analysis, a profound analysis of the human, of of human beings, let's say, of us all. Now, at the beginning of the war, these Greek warriors have been there for 10 years. No success. The Trojan walls are very thick and great. Troy is very rich. And although the Greek soldiers outnumber the Trojans have the help of many allies whom they buy. These are mercenaries, good word for you, because Troy is so rich that they can pay soldiers to help them. Besides that, most of the fighting, very few battles take place. The Trojans remain inside the walls, and they're safe. And so the war drags on and on. The Greeks, in order to have food, drink, and activity, spend a lot of time as pirates, attacking small towns or even cities, killing a lot of the men, taking the women and children as slaves, selling them. This is how they get food and money and all that. This has been going on for 10 years. Now, the attacks on the cities and towns and a lot of the fighting is done especially by Achilles. Achilles is the greatest fighter on the Greeks' side, and for that matter, the greatest at the war. He is a terror. When Achilles fights, people feel fear. He is so powerful. Now, and so fast and so beautiful. Achilles is the son of Peleus and Thetis, whom I told you about half an hour ago. The two that were forced to get married, Thetis, the minor sea goddess, and Peleus, the war hero, but a mortal man. So his mother is a goddess. He's a demigod, if you like, though the Greeks didn't insist on that. Helen, for that matter, is a demigod too. Her father is Zeus, and there are some other demigods in the Iliad. No problem, they will die. Okay, now at the very beginning of the Iliad, what has happened recently is this. Maybe a few months earlier, the Greeks attacked a town, Chrysae, captured a beautiful girl, many girls and many things, and then what would happen is the Greeks distributed the prizes of the attack to various people. First prize always went to Agamemnon, although Agamemnon seldom fought. Achilles did the fighting, others too, of course. Well, Agamemnon had chosen Chryses, the daughter of a prophet, of a priest of Apollo. Chryses, the names are difficult here, but let's just call them both Chryses, different spelling. A priest of Apollo is named Chryses, from the town of Chrysae. This Chryses has a daughter named Chryses, and Chryses has become the woman of Agamemnon. But Chryses' dad had come to the Greek camp bringing lots of gifts and money, and he begged Agamemnon to return his daughter back to him. Agamemnon had refused. Now the other Greeks sitting there had said, "This is very fair, give the daughter back, Agamemnon." But Agamemnon had said, "No, I will never give her back, and old man, never return here or I will hurt you." The poor old man had gone, had wept, and prayed to his god Apollo, he's a priest of Apollo, and asked Apollo to help. Apollo was very angry, and the famous famous moment near the beginning of the Iliad, when Apollo comes walking down from Mount Olympus with his bow in his hand, his weapon is the bow and arrows, the arrows clanging on his shoulders, sat down on Mount Ida, we remember Mount Ida, and started shooting his arrows of death. He began with animals, but soon was shooting at humans. And the funeral pyres, Pyres, were burning night and day. Everyone knew that something was wrong, that some god was angry, because animals dying and humans? Bad. So, at the very beginning of the Iliad, now we're ready actually to begin. Achilles calls an assembly, apparently to find out what's wrong, which god is angry. But what we must understand is that Achilles and everyone else already knows which god is angry and why. Agamemnon is wrong. Everyone really also knows that Achilles is angry because for 9 years he has been fighting, but always the first prize goes to Agamemnon, and he's sick of being at Troy, as many of the other men are sick of being at Troy too. But really, the real reason, and I'm going to take you to the bottom right now, though it goes even deeper by book 24, the real reason for Achilles' anger is that he knows his mother has told him, his mother Thetis has told him, that if he stays at Troy, he will die. He will achieve great glory, great fame, but he will die. If he goes home, he will live a long life, but no glory. So his dilemma is the fundamental dilemma of the warrior code. The warrior code, after all, is fight and win glory, go home and be a farmer, no glory. And glory is all there is. What else is there to the warrior code, or perhaps even to life? Therefore, Achilles has stayed, but he has stayed under the shadow of death. He stays knowing that his death can come any time now, certainly in the 10th year. And so he is understandably anxious, nervous, fearful, angry even. He's angry, and in this sense, Achilles is man. He's angry because he knows he's going to die. He's nervous because he knows he's going to die. We are nervous and angry and confused because we know that we are going to die. Death affects all of our actions, although we deny it, and although we pretend that it's not there. We live under the shadow of death. Here we're getting closer to the greatness of the Iliad. But I would point out one thing almost already, which probably, I think, does not get enough attention. The Iliad teaches us. Was Homer trying to teach us? I don't know. Is Shakespeare trying to teach us? I don't know. I don't think it's important to them. But nevertheless, Homer is teaching us that anger is almost never about what it seems to be about. I come home, I'm angry, I find a mess on the newspaper where my dog has defecated, good word for you, has gone to the bathroom. The dog has gone to the bathroom right where the dog should go to the bathroom, for that matter. Good dog. But I'm angry. I become angry at the dog. Oh! I clean up the mess. Maybe I kicked the dog. What am I angry about? Am I angry about the dog? No, of course not. What am I angry about? Am I angry about a bad incident that occurred, an unpleasant incident that occurred at school? Maybe. But I'm sure my anger goes deeper than that. There are other reasons for my anger. And if I really were to understand my anger, I would find many things that are totally unrelated to the dog, to the house, to the mess. This kind of thinking is the Iliad. We are going to dig deeper and deeper and deeper into Achilles' anger, and our anger in a sense, and work through it. And so the Iliad is about deep stuff. Okay. the assembly. Now we're in book 1, and things will go faster, but we're fine for time, I think. The Iliad is divided into 24 books, as they're called. Really, they're chapters. The poetry of the Iliad, the language of the Iliad is beautiful. It's just beautiful. I'm a kind of scholar. The best thing I've ever done is read the Iliad. Nothing could top that as far as I'm concerned. Okay. Book 1. The assembly is called. Achilles called the assembly. He's the first to speak. The heralds, who are symbols of civilization, as assemblies are symbols of civilization. Where there are no assemblies and laws, there is no civilization, period. The herald hands the staff to Achilles, who called the assembly. Achilles has the right to speak. And Achilles simply says, people are dying, animals are dying, some god is angry. I want to know who's angry. Let's ask Calchas, again, the prophet, who's angry? Calchas, speak. Calchas looks around and says, I know who's angry, but if I tell you a great man is going to be angry at me, and I hope someone will defend me, protect me against the great man. Achilles says, speak, Calchas, even if it's Agamemnon, I will protect you. Now, we must imagine, how does Agamemnon feel as he's sitting there, the great king, whose power has just been challenged by Achilles, and he and everyone else knows what Calchas is going to say. Achilles has defied, to defy, D-E-F-Y. Achilles has defied Agamemnon already before Calchas even speaks. Really, he defied Agamemnon even when he called the assembly, because everyone knew exactly what was going on. Homer never tells us this, though, but it's obvious. Just read and think. Homer makes us think, though, as Shakespeare does. So, Calchas says, okay, well, Apollo is angry, of course. He's angry because Agamemnon refused the offer of Chryses and was very rude, cruel even to Chryses. Agamemnon must return the daughter, Chryses, to her father, and must give Chryses gifts too. Ooh, now Agamemnon speaks. I don't like this, but I will do it for my people. I will return the daughter, I will give the gifts, but it's not right that I should be without a gift. I'm the king, I'm the most powerful. Therefore, I will give the girl up, even though I love her, I really love her, and I wanted to take her back to Argos with me. I'm sure Clytemnestra, the wife, would like that. If he had come home with his concubine, try the word out. In my mind, just to show you how deep Homer is, every time we see Agamemnon, we should realize that Agamemnon knows that he has done a terrible thing by sacrificing his daughter. Agamemnon, too, is under the shadow of death, I think, because I think he and everyone knows that Troy will fall. When Troy falls, Agamemnon will go home. To what? To a woman who is a powerful woman, more powerful than him, frankly. He's going to go home to certain death. He's under that shadow, too. Very interesting in what he says. I'm giving you advanced insight into the Iliad here, but it's amazing. It's like it's a cliche, really. Throw the pebble into the pond and watch the waves ripple and ripple and ripple. It just goes on. And Homer captures that in everything he says, almost. Homer has some bad moments, but, well. So, one of you princes must give me his prize, because it's not right, Agamemnon says, that I be without a prize. One of you, Odysseus, or maybe you, Achilles, he says, Oh, Achilles now gets angry. Greedy prince, he says, without addressing him formally, because the Greeks addressed people formally as Koreans do, depending on age and position and all that. The Greek civilization just like that too. Without addressing him formally, you greedy guy. You're always, all you think about is getting goods. I fight all the time. I lead the attacks on the cities. I loot the cities, but you take the best prize, and I get some little trinket, good word for you, some little bauble, B-A-U-B-L-E, good word for you. I'm sick of it. Agamemnon, always all you care about is fighting. You fight and fight. You are an uncivilized man, Achilles. I'm going to take your prize. I'm going to take Briseis, your concubine, and there's nothing you can do about it. I'm more powerful, not personally, but his army. And besides that, all of the kings, they're all kings, promised to obey Agamemnon anyway, swore to the gods, so Achilles will have to yield. The assembly breaks up. Agamemnon sends his heralds, really, to Achilles' tent. Achilles is sitting there angry, but he's very polite to the men when they come, shows a lot about Achilles, and he says, I know it's not your fault, it's Agamemnon's fault. I will yield, but I don't like it. They take Briseis. Meanwhile, Agamemnon has already sent a ship led by Odysseus, characteristically, with the girl Chryseis and with gifts to return the girl back to Chryseis. Achilles is frustrated and angry, as we know about many things, but most superficially, most obviously, he's angry at Agamemnon. He goes walking by the beach, crying, weeping hot tears. Thetis, his mother, hears him from the depths of the sea and comes to him. What's wrong, son? You know, mother, you're a goddess. Agamemnon took my prize and I'm angry. I want you, mother, Thetis, to go to Zeus and tell him, please, to support the Trojans for a while against the Greeks. Give the Trojans success against the Greeks. I, Achilles, am going to drop out of the fighting for a while, and when the Greeks start to lose, they will realize how much they need me, and Agamemnon will realize what a bad thing he did when he insulted me and took my prize. Oh, this is heavy. This is heavy, Thetis says. Well, Achilles says, Mother, you told me that Zeus owes you many favors, that you have done many good things for Zeus. You have boasted about this in my father's halls, Peleus, when I was a boy, many times. So, please do it. Thetis shakes her head and says, okay, but you realize, as I have told you before, my son, Book 1 is really great. We're still in Book 1. As I've told you many times, there are two fates that hang over you, my son Achilles. If you stay here in Troy, you win great glory, but you die. If you go home, you can live a long life, but no glory. I know, mother, you never let me forget it, and I don't forget it. Again, this is really what is at the bottom of his anger. So notice right away, his anger seems to be about Agamemnon's behavior toward him, about Agamemnon's affront is the word, the insult that he has endured. Agamemnon's taking his concubine, his lover, Briseis, from him, embarrassing him. That's what it seems to be about. It's not about that. It's just most obviously about that. Thetis goes to Mount Olympus where the gods are. So now we're going to meet the gods quickly. Zeus is sitting outside his palace, out on a hill, alone. The other gods are inside waiting for him to begin their dining. Thetis goes to Zeus and assumes the position of a suppliant. Suppliant, S-U-P-P. The suppliant in the Greek world is very important. In fact, Zeus is the god of suppliants. The suppliant is a person who begs for help, usually, or begs for his life from another person. The suppliant took the knees of the other person with the left hand and reached up to the face, usually the beard of a man, with the right hand. That position was sacred. She became the suppliant of Zeus, and Zeus, of course, had to say, "Stand up, Thetis, what do you want?" Thetis tells him what he wants, what she wants, exactly what Achilles asked for. Please help the Trojans for a while, so that they will realize how badly they have treated Achilles. "Oh," says Zeus, shaking his head, comically almost. "This will get me in trouble with my wife Hera." Okay, is this serious? We've got this Zeus who runs around raping women as a swan, who is worried about being nagged by his wife. This is not serious. Homer is a very serious man. This raises right away the very big question, which is, for me, one of the most interesting. What is Homer's attitude toward the gods? Homer is a serious man. Does Homer take these gods seriously? No, of course not. Homer uses the gods to tell his story. That's all. Homer's attitude toward religion is very interesting and a very deep question. But the Homer we know could not possibly take these gods, as they are most of the time, seriously. Okay, and this applies to the Iliad and the Odyssey. So we've got Zeus, the Lord of the universe, shaking his head and saying, "Oh my God, my wife is going to be angry at me if I help the Trojans, because she hates the Trojans." And why does she hate the Trojans? Because Paris gave the apple to Aphrodite rather than to Hera. Absurd. Nevertheless, Zeus says, "Okay, I'll do it." He nods his head, and when he nods his head, Olympus shakes. Absurd. And then Thetis leaves, goes back down to the sea. Zeus gets up and enters the palace where the other gods are waiting for him to dine. They all stand up respectfully. Most of them are children of Zeus anyway. And the others who aren't are all his brothers and sisters, in fact. But he has the power, he has the lightning, he has the power. Hera immediately starts to nag him. "Who was that you were talking to?" "I think it was Thetis. And I bet Thetis asked you to help the Trojans." She understands everything, as jealous people often do. Besides that, didn't the mountain just shake? So absurd. Zeus says, "Stop nagging me. Don't think that I have to tell you everything. Do I have to tell you everything?" This is domestic bickering. Absurd. "I do what I have to do, and I don't have to explain to you or the other gods." They bicker back and forth, and finally Hephaestus, who is lame and not very handsome, speaks up and says, "Please stop bickering. You're going to spoil the feasting," as if the feast were such a big, important thing to these gods, as it is apparently in Homer's eyes. Absurd also. And Hephaestus, a lame god, limps around carrying nectar and ambrosia, the food of the gods, serving them, scurries around, hurries around, so worried about the feast, and the sight is so funny that the other gods start to laugh. And they laugh, and all the anger dissolves. They have their feast, they go to bed, and Zeus is lying next to his wife Hera. The end of book 1. I'm spending a lot of time on book one because it's so important. It establishes everything that has to happen. There are other books as important, and I'll skip some unimportant books to spend time on them. But notice that at the end of book one, all is well on Olympus. They're fine. On Earth, well, it's not well. I think Homer is saying that one thing I think he is saying is that if the gods are these creatures, maybe they're pretty silly, but certainly they are incapable of understanding human pain, human suffering, and they're not even very concerned about it. After all, they are immortal, and we are mortal. Huge difference, huge difference. And generally, this is a problem in, I think, theology, when the gods become too anthropomorphic, that is, the gods resemble us a little too much. Nevertheless, there's always that final matter of their immortality, our mortality, which will separate them from us, and in the end make them perhaps incapable of feeling what we feel, let's say. Now, this is not a comment on the Christian God, although it is a comment on the Christian God when the Christian God resembles us a little too much, when he's simply granddad or an emperor or something absurd like that, when he, in short, is he. Can a God be a he? Come on. Okay, onward. Book two. Book two, a little bit important. It's nighttime. Agamemnon is sleeping. Zeus can't sleep. He's worried. Interesting. And he decides to send a dream to Agamemnon. And the dream says, in fact, there's so many things to talk about. I just have to skip, I guess. So many great things, so many interesting things, but I have to skip. Okay, the dream says, Agamemnon, Zeus says that today, at dawn, you will take Troy. Agamemnon wakes up. I'm going to take Troy. I'm going to take Troy today. How foolish, how foolish, how foolish. A lot of nonsense going on here. But he doesn't trust his dream entirely. Agamemnon is a complex man. Not simple, seldom admirable, a tormented man, tormented by his own ambition especially, and by his own past misdeeds, maybe like everybody, like a lot of us males, tormented by our ambition and our past misdeeds perhaps. Anyway, Agamemnon decides to summon his, what shall we say, cabinet, his, the chiefs who are his closest advisors. And he summons them. He tells them his dream. They are, because you're going to meet them again, Nestor, who is a very old man, a good advisor, Odysseus, who is the hero of the Odyssey, as you probably know, who is the most intelligent of all the Greeks, the most inventive, one of the bravest, one of the greatest fighters, one of the strongest, one of the best athletes. He is the remarkable man who is the hero of the Odyssey. Diomedes, who is a young hothead but a great fighter, and a few others and Menelaus, Agamemnon's brother, who is really there only because he's the brother of Agamemnon. Two others who don't matter. So, Agamemnon tells them his dream. It's maybe 4 a.m., middle of the night. And he says, I have a plan. I'm going to test the men. I'm going to call an assembly tomorrow morning and test the men by telling them, I give up, let's go home. Let's test the men. The other guys don't say anything, and so that's the plan. But what a stupid and pointless plan. Watch what happens. In the morning, we call an assembly. Hundreds, maybe thousands of men come to the assembly, and Agamemnon speaks. Agamemnon says, we've been here more than 9 years. We're all tired. We're never going to take Troy. Let's go home. And not surprisingly, all the men say, "Hooray, let's go home." And they all run for the ships. What? And what was the point of this stupid idea anyway? So we have this ridiculous situation in which all the men are running toward their ships. They're going to go home. They don't care about taking Troy. Why are they there anyway? To help Menelaus get his wife back? That's absurd too. So they're ready to go. And Agamemnon stands there scratching his head saying, what? What did I do then? Odysseus takes charge. Odysseus and Athena, the goddess, are almost one person. Now this is the other side of Homeric religion, which interests me so much that I want to tell you the final word about it. And I'll tell you more when we do the Odyssey, as I hope Dr. Shin wants us to. Athena, after all, is the warrior goddess, but she's also the goddess, basically, of intelligence. Not wisdom, I think, but intelligence. She's one of the goddesses of that anyway. Hermes has the other honor. The other gods not being particularly intelligent, frankly. And Athena, Hera sees all the men running to the boats, saying, "What? What is this? I don't want these men to leave. I want them to destroy Troy, to punish them for Paris's judgment." Athena wants the same thing. "Athena, go down there," Hera says, "and get those men back. Get those Greeks back." Athena goes to Odysseus, who's standing there thinking, "What? What is happening here?" And Athena basically gives him an idea. He speaks up and says, Men, stop. Agamemnon was only testing you. Are you cowards? You remember we had Calchas, the prophet, Calchas told us 9 years ago that we will take Troy in the 10th year. Are we going to break our promises? Are we going to quit now when we will take Troy in this year? No, come back. One man, Thersites, minor character but interesting, continues to grumble and complain. He's the complainer. Odysseus hits him with a stick, and the man actually cries in pain, and the other men laugh, once again laughter dissolving tension, because none of them like Thersites either, and everyone says, Odysseus has done a lot of great things, but that may be the best thing he ever did, by shutting that man up, and they all go back to the assembly. Okay. This time we're going to have a better start. Nestor speaks, and Nestor says, let's all arrange ourselves for battle, and everyone stand next to a relative or a member of his tribe, so that we fight bravely, because if we fight next to a member of our own tribe, then it's not likely that we'll run away. We'll stand bravely and fight. Good idea. The Greeks arranged themselves. And this is the famous catalog of Book 2, because we're still in Book 2. The catalog is great for people really interested in the Iliad, because it shows us how many ships each of these great men came to Troy with, the relative power of these people. Agamemnon by far the most ships, the most people, the most power. Many interesting things. After the Greek catalog, then we get the Trojans, because the Trojans arrange themselves too, and we get a glimpse of the Trojan forces. The Trojans, quite a few of them, but not enough, but the allies. The allies are there too, and in the end, the forces are just about equal. Interesting. The point at the end of Book 2 is the fighting is about to begin. The fighting will not begin again until Book 5. And this shows great insight into Homer too. Homer's way is, he can't just have us fight all the time. This guy dies, so what? Can't kill off the big heroes either. So one of Homer's problems is to always seem to be ready to fight, but delay and tell us other stories. Homeric digressions, we'll call it. Okay, Book 3. The fighting is about to begin. Wow. Out in the middle, between the two armies, jumps Paris, of all people. Now we know Paris, we know that he's not a great warrior, that he preferred Helen, and for good reasons. We know, too, that he's the cause of the war, in a way. But the causes go deep, too, way back. Is it fair to blame Paris? No, it's not. The causes go deep, as the causes of any war probably are much deeper than the obvious causes. Paris jumps out in the middle and challenges a Greek to one-on-one combat. And if Paris wins, he keeps Helen. If the Greek wins, he takes Helen and some gold too, let's say. Hooray! Everybody sits down. Hooray! Nobody really loves the fighting. Everybody sits down. Now remember, from book 1, Achilles is out. Achilles is back at his hut in the Greek camp, and with him his myrmidons, M-Y-R, myrmidons, 1,000 men perhaps, his followers. A big chunk. Okay. Now, from the Greek side, Menelaus answers the challenge. He's the wronged husband. Well, this is great. Menelaus and Paris will fight it out to see who will win, and we'll settle this war, and we'll end all this killing. Wonderful. So first we have to make a kind of truce, and to have the truce, from the Greek side, Agamemnon will sign the truce, the agreement, but Agamemnon says, send for Priam, the old man, the king of Troy, because I don't trust you young guys. I certainly don't trust Paris. I don't even trust Hector, his brother, the greatest of the Trojans. Send for Priam.